All right, welcome back, everybody. The state of our water, our drought situation here in Corpus Christi. This is kind of like our take two here on Facebook Live with Pat Simon and Dale Nelson. Mike Murphy's here, and Esteban Ramos is here. Both of these gentlemen, obviously, in charge. And the COO is on the side of me here. Mike is in charge of Corpus Christi Water, CC Water. And we've been talking all about our situation. We gave you the latest updates in our last Facebook Live. But Dale, as we were having some audio issues and we had to turn it off.
Yeah.
Dale, you had a really good question before we left.
Well, we had learned earlier that we're using about 100 million gallons of water per day. That's how much we're processing at the old Stevens filtration. But how much are we evaporating per day?
So that's a good question. Obviously, we have two large lakes, Choke Canyon being the larger of the two massive lakes. And with the high heat, the relentless high heat, let's put it that way, and strong winds like it was yesterday and obviously Saturday this weekend, I think there was heavy winds. August is going to be the harshest month of the year for evaporation, and right now it's about 21 inches a day is what we're losing in evaporation.
Then how does that equate?
Yeah,
do you have
how
any
does that
way to
amount?
equate that to gallons?
Yeah.
Or acre feet?
We could come up with an acre foot for you. I don't obviously that's a calculation I didn't bring with me.
Okay, what's more, the evaporation loss of water or the usage loss of water per day?
Probably the usage over. Yeah, I don't know. Let us look at that. Do
Do you know, Esteban?
Not at the top of my head, but you could imagine that you're talking about a huge pool of water, two huge pools of water, and the sun coming down, and it's 21 inches a day compared to.
Is that per day?
It said per day.
Okay.
And we're in discussions with the National Weather Service. We get briefings with them, and we discuss the situation.
No, it wouldn't be 21 inches.
No, I don't
Couldn't
think.
be.
I think it's 21
That's almost
inches
2
a month.
feet.
I think it's 21 inches a month.
And so,
But
at the same time, when you're talking about reservoirs, you're talking about also how the structure of the reservoir.
Right.
So as your reservoir is like on the outside, it evaporates. You see the evaporation effects faster because the drawdown, and that's what we really need to talk about. How the lake is being drawn down. There's two ways. One, we need to satisfy our public interest and our public use. We need to deliver water to the city of Corpus Christi and other areas around the community, such as Mathis, Alice, use water at Lake Corpus Christi. So as everybody's using at different times and different times of year, we just talked about how we know we live on the edge of the Wild Horse Desert. You know, we're used to this, go through this every single year. We're looking for those puddles of opportunity for rainfall and then the dry periods in between. The effects on our reservoirs have a greater effect in the summer compared to during the spring or fall. So as we move into the fall, the evaporation rates slow. As we're in the heart or the dog days of the summer, obviously we're going to have higher evaporation. And so it's trying to get through this. You know, many places in California and others have talked about putting these creative like shades or using a type of new technology or little black balls. They fill these lakes. We're talking about huge lakes.
Yeah.
Evaporation isn't something that I can battle. Can't stop the sun from rising. So we got to use it, right? We've got to also prepare ourselves for these dry times. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to get out to the community, educate them how they can use water in the most effective ways.
I want to talk about water alternatives because, and Mike, you and I were talking the other day when we were having this long-term discussion, and we used a lot of what you said last night on Chris 6 News at 10 for our special drought presentation of the news. We started talking about water alternatives, and I asked the question about when city leaders or when leaders in government generally react or act on something in a sense of an urgent manner, and it's usually during an emergency. And it couldn't get more of an emergency, or could, but we're headed in that direction.
Right.
When it comes to water alternatives, I was at a veterans meeting this morning. I was hearing from Councilman Hernandez, who mentioned just a couple of years ago, they were talking about water alternatives, and that plan or something was voted down. So is it now really the time to look at alternatives and act on those other than desal? Okay, because that's one that you're looking at. And two, how do you see that playing out right now when we're more advantageous right now to act on for the future so we don't have, you're going to have these issues, but it lessens the harsh effects of those issues if you have those alternatives.
Yeah, so no doubt that we are looking for additions to our water portfolio. Right now, we have basically 4 sources of water that we touched on earlier in the week. We need to add to that. All of our water sources right now are rainwater dependent. That's just a cold hard fact. Everything that we get our water from today is dependent on rainwater. So what we're looking for is a drought-proof source of water. And obviously desal is the leading method of achieving that because we have this incredibly huge volume of water, one of the largest volumes of water anywhere in the world, and so it makes good sense that we use it. But that does not mean that we do not look for alternate sources of water. So we're looking at groundwater as an option. We're looking at aquifer storage and recovery as another option. And then we're looking for other sites other than the Inner Harbor and La Quinta site. All of these are still on the table, and all of them that we are looking for. And I know our city council and our mayor and our city manager, it's amazing how hard these men and women work. I mean, I wish everybody could see behind the scenes, behind the curtain, how much time and effort goes into this conversation. And yeah, we are in a drought, but we're working, I guess tirelessly probably is an overused term, but we really are doing that, trying to identify what these other alternate sources of water can be. And we're right in the middle of that. I mean, we're working on a couple of ideas right now.
And how soon will we be able to see something finalized on that to push it forward?
Yeah, so nothing that we just talked about is going to help us out of this particular drought. And everybody understands that. Everybody gets that. But these are all long-range projects, and probably the shortest term one is 36 to 48 months away. That's the shortest term. If we started today, construction, it's a 48-month project. But there's still so many things that are left to do. Like let's just take desal for example, because that is the direct path that we're on right now, is to find that source or use that source of water. We're still waiting for TCEQ permits to move that process forward. We're very close. We think we're very, very close to the TCEQ working with us on those permits. But then once we do that, we still have the Army Corps study that we're currently working on, and then the design of the project itself, and then building it. So it's a ways off.
So the 36 to 48 months, I'm sorry, Dan, the 36 to 48 month, what is that source?
So if we look at a groundwater site, that's another option. But this is not to replace desal. Let me make sure that's perfectly clear.
Okay.
So how long does it take? How long would it take to from today going forward
Well,
to have a
that's one
desal
of the-
plant in operation?
A desal plant in operation, so we're looking at probably 5 to 6 years, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me just say this. So how much is it going to cost? Because originally when this idea came up, it was said by city officials that it wasn't going to cost me, you, or you anything. Yeah. It was going to be paid for some other way. Yeah. And so I don't believe that. Yeah. I believe that it's going to cost a lot of money. And
well, there's no doubt that building a desal plant is expensive.
Right.
It is, but it's what we call the most affordable option. Now the city has, through a very, I guess, stringent competition, we won the battle of the cities trying to get SWIFT loan money from the state. And so Corpus Christi was selected as that city to take that money. So that's $222 million SWIFT loan that the city was awarded. Okay. Now that money has to be paid back, but it's a low interest loan. And so how do you pay that back? So there's several ways that you pay that debt off, right? You got to pay that debt off. And so it's considered a low interest loan, but the money that big industries are paying into the drought surcharge is going to pay for probably about 60%, Esteban, of that amount will be paid by large industries through their surcharge, which is the 25 cents per thousand that they're currently paying right now. So that's going to pay for a large part of it. And then the remaining part of that $222 million is going to be financed by the city.
So I wanted to just cut back real quick because I know that Dale mentioned desal, and you talked to me the other day about desal too, the 45-year mark, if there are no like major challenges to something like that. But what was that 36 to 48 month resource?
So
what was that one?
So that's we're looking at a couple of different options right now.
Okay.
Aquifer storage and recovery
Okay.
is one of them, and that's where you take, in this particular case, you would take water, effluent water out of our wastewater treatment plant, and then you would inject it into the aquifer.
Okay.
And then once you got enough, you would pull that water from the aquifer, send it to the water treatment facility, and treat it. And you can actually store billions of gallons of water that way.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's like everything else. It's relatively expensive, but it takes a long time to build that necessary infrastructure with permits,
Gotcha.
right? And the other one is just basic groundwater, like you would do like on ranch land. You know, if you found enough water capacity, then you could drill down, create a well field, roads, pipes, everything, and then you pipe it to what would be the closest discharge point that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're currently looking at is a well field that you would discharge somewhere along the Mary Road pipeline.
Right.
The only problem is the Mary Road pipeline only has so much capacity, right? So probably the best way to do that would be to build a pipeline that would take it all the way to the Owen Stevens water treatment facility. Now there are other solutions, and we're going to be hearing other options about other locations where you could discharge that water into Mary Road pipeline. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. But we're talking with some groups right now that want to explain how they can make that happen.
And I want to make it clear, we've never stopped talking about water, talking about alternative sources. Looking at it as the water resource manager, it's my duty to bring light to these different alternatives that's around here, and then also tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth about each of the sources, because there's always different nuances to every source of water that you talk about, and then you have to think about how these different nuances play into your total water portfolio, how it will affect the other sources, how those other sources may have an effect on the source that you're drawing from, and what are the costs. And so each one has to establish its own life and life cycle and analysis. And the city of Corpus Christi Water, CC Water, continues to this day with the leadership that we have, challenging me to talk about water resources, talk about where we can look at water and how we can bring it into our system, both environmentally responsible, economically friendly, and be sustainable. So we do that.
And we appreciate that. It's one thing to talk also and show all of the data and everything, but to act on it is another thing. And that's why I was mentioning early on and really underscoring the fact that this is kind of a very urgent situation. You're asking people now to conserve, and rightfully so, but at the same time, when you're talking about talking it, but acting on it, that's why I was trying to give everybody an idea of how soon could we see some of these alternative water resources acted on. Yeah.
So that's the tough question to answer, because everything is a little bit different. Like I think what Esteban is saying is everything is a little bit different, whether it's groundwater, aquifer storage water, or whether it's just reusing reclaimed water, which is water that goes through a wastewater treatment plant. Everything has a process and a timeline with it. And literally it's 36 months to 48 months would be the quickest turnaround. I mean, be a direct answer to your question. And even that may be a little bit unrealistic once you start getting into the permit process, because right now the world is so different. And I don't mean that in a horrible way, but with supply chain issues, with with labor issues, things like that, it's really tough to estimate this, because now you're looking at how long does it take to get a pump and motor in, and the piping that goes with it and all that. It's different. It's different than it was a year ago. And what you could used to get in a couple of months is now taking a year and a half to get the stuff in. So we have to battle that. And we have to take that into consideration also.
Is it more of kind of you're being proactive about it? Hey, folks, we're trying to do something about it. Have some patience. Conserve right now. But we've got our eye on the ball.
We do, and it's not just us, but it's our entire city council and our city manager and the mayor. Everybody's got their eye on this ball, and it's such a large amount of money that we're talking about. Every option that I just mentioned to you is extremely expensive, but then what's expensive if you're in a drought. I mean, so I mean that's what we're having to weigh right now. And the options that we're weighing is like Dale, like what you said. What's it going to cost me as a water customer? How much is it going to raise my water bill? Is it unrealistic, or can I just suffer through this drought until a more feasible, affordable option is available? Those are the things that council has to weigh on every day. So.
Yeah, I just the reason I brought it up is because I don't know if a lot of people are aware or not, but desalination is one of the most expensive forms of water that you can possibly develop and and produce.
Yeah,
technology is getting better.
It is getting better.
Even in this area, there are universities such as Texas A&M Kingsville that are working on the technology, working on the membrane technology that would help us in having an affordable water supply into the future. Dr. Camacho at Texas A&M Kingsville is one of the leaders in that technology. And so we can be a huge resource for this community and for the world to show that a seawater desalination plant can be placed in this area with all the knowledge, all the institutional that the South Texas can bring to it.
And what would you do if you had one? What would you do with the byproduct, the salt?
The byproduct, the salt that we went through a long process, a 12-month process, looking at the flow at our specific sites. We went and did the long, hard work to get into at the beginning. We didn't take this project just lightly. We could have filled out an application and put the best, the guesses, because the TCEQ allows you to make assumptions. We wanted to use real data. We wanted to do the right thing that we owed this community. And so we took those long steps. What we have done is find the two best sites that we feel that provide our area a economically feasible, environmentally friendly, sustainable seawater desalination plant.
So would you put are you going to take the salt offshore? Are you going to put it back in the bay?
We have it discharging in the inner harbor. We have it discharging into the channel, and where there is good mixing, we have good depth, we have good
because of the
area,
current.
because of the current and because of the activities that are going on in that. There's a lot of inflows from municipal and industrial discharges that add to the supply. A lot of people think that, just inflows mean coming from the river or that's it. But there's a lot of inflows into our bays and estuaries that people don't see on a given day.
And another thing that we're doing, Dale, as part of the design is we're using jet diffusion, because when you reintroduce because we're not adding any salt to the water.
No.
And that's a misnomer that a lot of people don't understand.
Right. It was there in the first place.
It was there in the first place. And all we're doing is we're separating from the water. We're using the water. We're going to reintroduce the brining water back in.
Right.
And we're using jet diffusion to introduce that water back into the harbor or into the bay. And then it dissipates to negligible impact within 200 feet of the jet diffusion. And we've got modeling that shows that. It's a little wonky, but we've got modeling that shows that.
Couldn't you export some of that brine to the folks up north during the winter
for
the winter time? That's an idea that was from one of our local veterans. He says, "Hey, why don't we just put it in some train cars and ship it on up and make some money off of it?"
Yeah. So the technology, even though it's very expensive to reuse the salt for something else, it's very expensive. We've already got requests for rights to the salty water, requesting rights to that. So we're investigating that, because some of these plants have to use salt in their water, in their process, know. And so we're looking at that. It's got potential. And one of the on the La Quinta site, we're already looking into that technology to see if we can do that. And then that takes zero emissions into the water.
Right.
Could that offset some of the cost then?
It could. It absolutely could. If it has.
Well, I mean, like a little bit.
A little bit. But the thing is, it's the technology. It's the technology catching up with itself. That makes sense. It's got to catch up. And so it was just something that we heard about 2 months ago, that this technology is now becoming a reality.
Yeah. So this is really important.
Yeah.
I think this is probably the most important thing you just said.
Agreed.
The last 30 minutes.
So agreed. I know we want to do a quick lightning round. I know we're trying to wrap this up right now too, but we do have some questions from some of our viewers. So I wanted to pass some of these along. One's about the citations. I'll get to that one in a second. But there's one from Mike White who wrote to Dale and myself last night. He says, this is multi-part, so stay with me.
Okay.
He says, what happens to the water after industry uses it? If it's not, is it discharged into the bay? Is it discharged into the, if it's discharged into the bay, then why does it not count as a water release? And why can't that water be recycled back to the water plant or lake? I know it's a
So, no, that's a good question. So, yeah, to all of the above. So, earlier question was release, or not tonight, but our last conversation was releasing water for environmental purposes, right?
Right.
And that water goes from Lake Corpus Christi, goes over the Cal Allen Dam, and then it's released into the bays and estuaries. That's good raw water. Mm-hmm. But since we're in stage 1 drought with water restrictions, then we are curtailing that water. Okay. So it becomes more important for the discharge of industrial going into the bays and estuaries, not only from wastewater treatment plants. We've got 6 wastewater treatment plants that all release water, treated water. Okay, I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is treated water that we release into the bays and estuaries. So we're continuing to do that, and so are our industries releasing water. So it's critical to the bays and estuaries that these businesses and these commercial entities and industries release their water. So yes, we're doing all of the above, and they can reuse it and they can recycle it, but at some point you've got to release it.
And we do get credit towards our releases for that.
What kind of credit?
We get a credit on the amount they're discharging as a whole to our monthly regime. So say we have to, according to the agreed order, we would have to release 1,200 acre-feet of water, but we get a 500 acre-foot credit on before, because all these releases are going into the bay and estuary.
And that's reflected on your daily report.
Exactly. And you can go to the the Nueces River Authority and look at that every day.
I do.
I know he does. It keeps me on track. Okay, so let's talk about the citations. I know as of like noon yesterday, it was like 380 citations for those who violate the stage 1 water restrictions. I was talking to someone this morning. He says there's a difference with his case. He was cited, by the way. He says there's a difference with his case with a sprinkler system versus a septic system. He has a septic system, and he was still cited for that. And he was just trying to educate those who are sending citations. Well, first of all, should he have been cited if it was a septic?
Well, so you kind of have to put yourself in the position of the enforcement officer, because he sees water at 4 o'clock in the morning on an off day sprinkling. And unless they've asked for an exemption and been given the placard that says this is septic water, this is not potable water, then he will cite them. Now, like we said earlier, the fines can be up to $500, but it's determined by the municipal court judge. And so, unfortunately, if it's already been cited and it's now in the process of the municipal court, you've got to show up and plead your case. And that's unfortunate. But this was, I think, probably, because I think I know the same person that you're talking about.
Gotcha.
This was like the first day that we started citing. This was like Monday week ago, right? Okay. And so I think we've gotten better. We know these areas a little bit better that have septic systems that are using their septic reused water for irrigation of their lawn. Okay. But so it's just, I don't think there was a mistake made. It was just how do you know if you don't know?
He was saying it's color coded. There's different colors with one and the other. So I mean we can go down that road. But the other thing too is about citations in general. Are people getting it, Mike? Are people understanding stage 1 and are acting on that?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. We see the numbers are curtailing off, and as you would expect that they would. But what we're trying, we spent 6 weeks educating our public that we're in stage 1 with water restrictions. Okay, so we did it for 6 weeks, and we did like programs like yours and social media, print media. We try to get out as much as we possibly could. So we felt 6 weeks, everybody should know that this is going on. So if you're still in violation of the water restrictions, then it's probably you're in restriction, and it's just like catch me if you can kind of a thing, which is it's unfortunate, because all we really want to do is compliance. Because like I said earlier, conservation is our best tool right now. And for the vast majority of our community, people are taking this seriously. But there are always going to be those few that don't. Now, there are a lot like this gentleman or lady that you were talking about that kind of got caught in a gray zone, no pun intended, with gray, but kind of got caught in that gray zone. And you could, I'm sure the judge is going to, I can't speak for the judge, but hearing their case will probably just dismiss that.
Reasonable. Be reasonable about it, not be, so strict on something like this. When right now it seems like, wait a minute, is the city coming after us because we're violating water restrictions?
Yeah.
It's probably at the beginning it was an education for them, right?
Right. Definitely was. And so I guess it's like Esteban was saying earlier, we're trying to change your whole attitude and perception of where we are with water right now. And unfortunately, the pocketbook is one of the places that gets your attention and gets it really fast.
Yeah.
And so we see that we can kind of see it trending down right now, which is what you would anticipate. And that's really what we want. We're trying to hit that 10% mark that I talked about earlier, 10% reduction. And unfortunately, this is one of the ways that we do it. So.
Well, and you can probably hit the 5% mark just by doing it late at night or early in the morning when the sun's and the wind is not as it doesn't exist or is not as terrible as it is during the day.
Yeah. So there's nowhere where it's allowed to use irrigation between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. It's off limits for everybody always right now in stage 1 drought.
And that's very smart.
Yeah.
Because that's when you have your most evaporation right there, and you get the least mileage out of the water that you are using. And when you're using water, it is coming out of your pocketbook. Besides the fine, and the handheld. Now, if you have a cutoff nozzle, you can use that right now. You can use that anytime.
You can. And a lot of people are using it to protect the foundation. Like I said earlier, protect the foundation of your home, which is a very smart thing to do.
Right.
And we encourage that. We don't want anybody's house to be damaged because of water restrictions. That's definitely not our goal. So.
Right. And all I'm saying is that I think everybody understands that. But if you use it before 10 a.m. or after 6, your water will go further.
Absolutely.
Than if you use it during the heat of the day when evaporation is so strong.
Evaporation is, like we said earlier, when we messed those numbers up, but I think it's 21 inches per month. But yeah, that's evaporation in the heat it's just a waste of time, to be honest with you. If you're out there spraying and it's 110 degrees outside, it's just really not doing anything. And I think a landscaper will tell you that it's not doing you any good anyhow. So why waste your time?
We are probably at a good point to stop this tonight, but we were in some earlier discussions. Maybe we continue something like this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, whatever the case may be, to keep the folks out there educated, if you guys are good with that.
Yeah. So one of the I guess challenges or charges that City Council gave Esteban and myself, I guess 2 council meetings ago, was to be more open to the public, more available to the public. So for sure, we would be willing to do something like that because it's important to get the word out. And I just want everybody out there to know we think you're doing a great job with these water restrictions. We know it's tough. Everybody feels it. I feel it. We all are feeling it right now. It's not like it's missing anybody. Everybody's feeling the pinch right now. But I think
it's a very complicated issue.
Yeah, and if our community comes together, like I know they are, we can feel it. We can feel it. Esteban and I can feel it. That it's coming together. We can get through this.
That's what we need.
Well,
and we need rain.
And we're in the same weather pattern, the La Nina weather pattern that we were in a year ago. But a year ago, we were in a drought, but it was a very short drought, and the rain kicked in April of last year, and it never stopped, and we ended up with the 3rd wettest year on record. This year, it hasn't kicked in yet, but I believe it will. And when it does kick in, I believe you're going to say, "Oh my God, what happened?" Because I think it's going to be big. It's not going to be. It's going to. The pendulum is swinging like this, and we're over here in the drought, and it's going to go back this way. And I think it'll happen between now and Halloween. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't have to happen with a storm. And we did all that rain last year without any tropical activity whatsoever. So you don't have to have a storm in order to make the situation improve here. So that's what I think will
I
occur
hope so.
in the next 3 months.
I'm counting on you being right.
Yeah,
You've been right so far.
You have. No pressure, Dale. None at all. Hey, listen, folks, thank you so much for joining us on Facebook Live. We'd like to thank again our guests today, Michael Murphy, the COO of CC Water, and Esteban Ramos, who is the Water Resources Manager for CC Water. I appreciate you guys. Let's see if we can continue this conversation to make sure that everybody's educated. And things change, right? I mean, we're closer to that stage 2 restriction. So, and what would that entail, right? So we'll continue this conversation for sure. And of course, our Chief Meteorologist, Dale Nelson. Thanks for joining us on Facebook Live.
Thanks, Mike.